So, as I was about to say, our guest presenter tonight is a MoveOn member, a POC member, her name is Chloe Beal, and Chloe has been an active member of MoveOn for more than a decade, and as she says, possibly even longer. Well, recently we had a chance to meet Chloe in Atlanta when she attended MoveOn's 25th anniversary summit. And at that summit, she says she was inspired by the determination of fellow attendees to fight for our freedoms. I love that sound. And as a result, she has committed to taking on a more active role in the 2024 presidential election campaign. Chloe is a retired television news producer with over 20 years of experience in the field. She has worked in several cities, including Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York. And Chloe enjoys a variety of music genres. She can sing, y'all, from house and jazz to Broadway. It is my honor. Seriously, we've had some great phone conversations. I feel like I know her even better from the summit. So it's my honor to introduce to you guys Chloe Beal. Would you please join me in welcoming her? Her focus tonight is to be on GOTV for communities of color, requires constant contact. Take it away, Chloe.
Thank you, Miss Evelyn. Welcome, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you this evening. I must confess that Evelyn twisted my arm to do this after a mobilizer call because I said something on the call. She says, "Oh, you need to talk." And I'm like, "No, I don't." But here I am. So thank you so much. What she talked about, my decade or more of involvement with MoveOn, it has mostly been with phone banking and texting and doing that work. And in doing that work, I've learned when you're talking with people and interacting with people that you start to learn some things about what gets their attention and how they feel you're interacting with them and the timing of it. So when I put this together, it's based on literally just my experience over the past decade or so in doing phone banking and texting. And then I also attended at the summit one of the workshops, which was great, which was on relational organizing, which dovetail right into what I'm going to talk about tonight, because it's some of the things that I have been doing for a long time, but it's really important. And it's basically your relationships are the foundation of where you start to interact with people in our communities to get them to be interested in voting, to understand the importance of voting, and especially in this time. So without further ado, I'm going to try to go to my outline here and discuss some of the points. And just bear with me because I've not done this before. But the first thing that I want to note is that outreach to any community of color cannot be something that is just when it's time to vote and you show up, a few months before the election and you start knocking on doors or calling people, whatever. There are so many communities in all of our communities that feel left out, or that no one has they've not seen anybody, in all the months leading into it. No one's made that contact. So in that sense, you're leaving votes out there, literally votes that you could have, cultivated just by interacting with them and contacting them. And that literally starts with your family, your friends, your immediate circle of who you interact with socially, your neighbors, or people you're in clubs with, that sort of thing. And just have casual conversations with them about their thoughts of what's going on, and are they registered? That's so key. Are they registered to vote? Because you're at least starting to get them to think about it and get them engaged in conversation. And it's so important because so many people walk around saying they're just tired, they're overwhelmed, there's so much going on, the news is it's just too much to handle, and they're tuning out. And again, one of the reasons why I came back from Atlanta, I was just determined and committed that this is so important. We are in a very, very serious time, and every vote's going to count. And I have been hearing, that's what I think got Miss Evelyn to ask me to do this. When I came back, I've been hearing with people I talk with, my friends and family, that they're like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to vote. it doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. They're not doing anything for Black people anyway. You name it. And I just like, no, no, no. You've got to understand what time we're in, and start to have that conversation. It's not combative. You just present, why it's so important now, what the issues are, and then you let it go. But you always keep coming back to it. And it just starts there. It because some of the people literally are telling me, I'm not going to vote. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter. And I just feel if you start talking to them about it and ask them why, and then explain to them why you think it's important and why you think, why you participate, and share that with them, I think at least you get them thinking, and not to be so closed-minded about, just I'm not going to participate. So that's what I started doing. Literally, when I came back from Atlanta, I actually talked to my sister and shared with her that I had attended the conference, the summit. And she was like, "Oh, that's so cool. What did you do?" Well, of course, she loved Common, so it was cool to show her pictures of Common. But in the end, she ended up signing up, and she joined MoveOn. And that was really cool because my sister votes, and I always talk to her and encourage her to vote. But my sister's not active in terms of she doesn't like to get out there and you know, well, she does, but it was really something for me to hear her say, "Oh, I want to get involved. I want to join." And I was so thrilled because that's exciting. And so you can move people in ways that you don't imagine just by sharing your involvement with MoveOn, or the things you've done in terms of interacting with other voters and how you've helped in previous elections. And people don't know that if you don't, share that with them, that you do that stuff from home, literally on your phone and on your laptop or whatever, that it's that easy that you can do that. Your involvement is critical as well as your vote. So that's my first point, is that you never stop trying to cultivate a vote. You never stop trying to cultivate a voter. And as Evelyn and I were talking about before, that's what happened in Atlanta on the ground when they flipped Georgia, because of the work for decades, over a decade, that those on the ground organizations have been doing. They never stop working on cultivating the votes. There's never an off season. They do it nonstop. And that's what we have to understand. And in our individual communities is how we keep our communities and people in our communities engaged and help them understand the power and the importance of their vote. And that goes into the next the next point. My other point is, I said early conversations will help you establish what the potential voters' concerns are. And that's really important, because what I've learned in making the phone banking and the texting is you need to hear what they're thinking. You need to hear what issues are really impacting them in their life right now, today, because so many people think that's off in the distance. They don't really listen to me. I have this going on. Gas is high. My bills are high. Groceries are high. And they can't see beyond what's literally, like they talk about those kitchen table issues. And you listen to that and you acknowledge that. And part of what I learned in all my years of being a producer, I was out in the field a lot interviewing people in the community. And what I learned is that you always meet people where they are, and you respect them for that, and you listen, active listening, active listening. And then when you hear what they're saying to you and you acknowledge it, then you try to, what is very calmly, like, explain, yes, these are things that are very important. And right now, we have to say Biden because that's the administration that's in now. What they have done, if you know some things about breaking it down, what money is in the pipe to come into your community. There's money out there. Like today, President Biden literally was in Philadelphia, and he brought a $22 million grant to reopen 3 fire stations that had been shut down for almost 10 years. And they got cut back in budget cuts. So when there's money coming into your community like that, you need to let people know that money's coming, that's helping. It takes a minute the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's money out there, like I learned, if you put, and you can tell these voters that, you want to put new windows in your house and new doors or a new heat pump, there's money in the Inflation Reduction Act. You can get tax credits for it now. You can get a rebate. There's all kind of, criteria, yes, all of that, but it's out there. So homeowners can get help. There's money in the pike, and you have to help them see that. Even if it's just looking around at the construction and road works that are going on, those are union jobs. People are they're getting jobs, they're working. In my area, I'm on the Northeast corridor of Amtrak. They're doing all kinds of upgrades for Amtrak. All that money's coming in to help people. You have to let people see that and talk about that. But at the end of the day, when we tell them all of these things, we have to also bring about the reality of the existential threat we're facing right now with what's going on in this election and who is running and what he's promising to do. And then break that down to them is like, while all these things are important, everything gets knocked at the knees and kneecapped if we don't have a democracy, if we don't have a government that serves us, that we have no voice in, or if we have a government where they're calling the military out in the streets, they're stripping you of your rights and your freedoms. And it's about, you have to make the stark contrast that I believe that you let them know it's really, you make it simple. It's either about your freedoms or you don't have a government that represents you. And then everything else comes afterwards. If you have a government that represents you, then we can still keep talking about legislation and roads and interest rates and money. But if you got a situation where you got a person coming in saying day one, they're going to be a dictator and they're going to dismantle, government and take away civil service jobs and, invoke the Insurrection Act and put the military on the streets, well, we got a serious problem because it doesn't matter how high your inflation is and, whatever. You've got a whole situation where you've got no freedoms and no democracy. And I think I explained to people, just look at what we've seen has been eroding in since 2016, the kinds of freedoms we've lost. Women have lost the right to have autonomy over their body. The situation with that woman going on in Texas is just horrendous. It's just horrendous. We've lost affirmative action. Literally, affirmative action was passed when I graduated from high school. So in my lifetime, we no longer have affirmative action. We can talk about all these things that are happening, the Supreme Court doing the things they're doing to erode our rights. I've never seen in my lifetime our freedoms shrinking. We're being taken from us as opposed to expanding. And that's what, if you explain that to people, to take a look at what is happening, what we're losing, then maybe they can understand, yes, all these things are important, but this is the threat we're facing and it's serious. So that's kind of how I try to keep it simple in terms of pointing it out to them in that way. It's about your freedoms and your rights versus having a situation where there's just total autonomy and a dictatorship. When you are talking with them and they are so adamant about they don't want to be involved, they don't care, they're checked out, ask them at least, are you registered? Because you can still be registered and be checked out, okay? Get them registered, if nothing else, because you can always keep working on them and talking to them about getting out to vote, about caring about the vote. And then so you don't lose that battle, because the conversation keeps going. But if they're not registered, then that's a vote you've lost, completely lost, because they're not even eligible if they're not registered. So as part of that constant working on getting out the vote, you should be constantly making sure you're getting people registered. So if that's, at family cookout, some of your social clubs that you're involved with, I don't care if if your daughter's Girl Scout troop is selling cookies, maybe you can have a table next to it where you register people to vote. At campus, student events, all kind of things are happening, whatever's going on. If somebody's having a big concert, some big, things going on, have somebody, involved with setting up See if you could get a table set up outside as people coming in, you can register people to vote. But right now, that's what we should be focusing on, having those conversations and also making sure you're increasing the voter pool, because there's been so much work done. And that leads into my next point about the gerrymandering, the obstacles that they put up in so many states to even vote. They're calling the voter rolls. If you haven't voted in a year, they pitch you. Or in Georgia, anybody can come and just challenge, if you're on the voter roll or not. The gerrymandered districts, it's crazy. Where I'm originally from, Ohio, they can't even use veteran IDs anymore to go use as the ID to vote. The veterans can no longer even use a veteran ID. And in a lot of these college campuses, these states don't even allow students to use their college IDs. So and they've made a concerted effort to try to downturn the student vote as well. And what I look at when I say this to people is like, you're not interested, you're checked out, but have you thought about why they work so hard to keep you from voting, to block your vote, to do whatever they can to push it back? Because that is your power. And if it wasn't your power, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't be working so hard to keep you from doing it. And once you make people or help people see that vote is their power, because they have to be aware of all the major efforts to keep them from voting, to blocking mail-in voting, reducing the number of drop boxes in places. In Pennsylvania now, there's going to be another challenge in the courts because the court just ruled that the undated ballots have to be counted. So we know there's going to be an appeal of that. So these are all things, if you help bring that to people's attention, how hard people are working to keep them from voting. Well, why are they working so hard? Why is that so important? And if you make them understand that, or help them to understand it, because you can't make anybody do anything, but try to help them to see that big picture, that it's about power. And they want not to have, they don't want you to have that power. So I always tell people, your vote is your power. And I always hear from some friends of mine, one of my girlfriends let me know that she was a political science major, and she just given up on this whole situation because it's rigged. And I said, yes, but I said, as Black people in this country, I know democracy has not been, we haven't been realized with full democracy in this country, but it's what we've got. So you've got to learn to work within and without the system. You've got to use what tools you have. And that vote is one of your major tools. And yeah, it's just something that I've paid even more attention to, because I have been doing a lot of ancestry work on looking for my ancestors, and doing a lot of work on ancestry.com. And I've been finding pictures of like my great grandmothers and grandfathers. And in my family, my great grandmother was a slave in Tennessee as a child. And then when emancipation came, she became what they call a bound girl, meaning that the slave master still had rights over her, like a contract for her to work and stay on the plantation. And I looked at that and I thought, just imagine what they've been through. Just imagine what my parents, who are both gone now, what they lived through in Jim Crow. My father was in the military and the Army. I was born on an Army base in Fort Sill. And when they would go back and forth from Ohio to Oklahoma, when they got to Maryland on the train at the Mason-Dixon line, with me as a baby, my mother and father had to move to the colored car. And once they got to Oklahoma, they were living in, colored areas. They could only drink out of colored water fountains. All this was in my lifetime. And so when I always say to people, just think about what your people went through to help you be here, to exist, to continue what they fought for. So why now act like it's not important to have that vote when you think about what they survived and what they've been through? And all of us could tell those stories, and we're all connected. And when I talk about that ancestry, I also have Choctaw in me. I have Blackfoot in me. I have African in me. We have figured out we're somehow connected to Benjamin Banneker. We're trying to pull those threads. And he's come from a lineage of an English indentured servant who came to America, who ended up marrying a child who was from a slave, who was a prince, who was brought over as a slave from Africa. So I say all that to you to say that we're all mixed in here together. And we all have something that all of our ancestors came and struggled to come to this country to do. Why not keep fighting and use your vote? So that's how I want them to understand how powerful the vote is. I wanted to also just hone in on the point of focusing now what's happening now and sounding the alarm. As a journalist, a former journalist, I've been watching now, some of these journalists are really like picking up the ball and sounding the alarm about what is to come if this man is elected again. And it's not just about him. It's about the enablers. It's about the entire situation with the extremists and what they're all doing to have a minority rule in this country. And if there's a thing that's going on, if I have to say this, I never thought in my life I was going to ever agree with Liz Cheney. But Liz Cheney is out here sounding the alarm with her new book, and she is saying that the times are serious. This is not a joke. You believe these people, what they're saying, and she is telling you, we are in a serious situation. Everyone has to work together. We all have to do our part. We all have to vote. And if you can get that message across to your family members and say, well, geez, she's a Republican and she's saying this. She's sitting there telling you what she saw, what happened. She's sitting here telling you, she's telling people we have one party that no longer functions as a party and we have to save this country. And the part of saving this country is everyone's going to have to get out and do their part and you have to vote because that's what's going to help us. So if you can get someone to understand that they are part of this huge movement, this huge wall of people who are like, the last stop, the last bastion before it all collapses. I mean, I don't know what else you can tell them. I mean, it's just like, it's history recycling. And if you can connect the dots to let them know, if it wasn't for people who stood up and fought and marched. I recently saw the movie Rustin, and it took everybody coming together to put that march on Washington. It was, civil rights groups, it was Black people, it was white people, it was Jewish people, it was all people, young people. Everybody came together to fight for civil rights. Everybody did. And that's what we have to realize. It's going to take all of us. And we have to help our people and our communities understand that. And give them that respect to make them help them understand that their vote is so important. It is so powerful. I think here's another point. Oh, and when you get to that point and you start talking about what's going on, a lot of our people are tired. A lot of people just going to work. They can just do the grind just to take care of what's happening every day. And so they're not paying attention to the news. They're not paying, and the news that's coming into our community is often distorted. There's a concerted effort on the extreme right's part to put disinformation and misinformation in our communities on Latino, Spanish language radio, Black radio. That interview that Trump did on Univision, which was, there's so much blowback about like what's going on with Univision, who's running the show there now to allow that to happen. And it's an all-out push. They're out there putting information in our communities. And we have to be the people then to put the truth out there, to help put the truth out there, to push back. They're flooding the zone with their message. They are flooding the zone with misinformation. And the problem that I see right now is that so many people are in their silos getting their information, if at all. Like the younger people, they're looking at TikTok, which is not news, and Instagram, and nobody sees like a real news. And then there's this whole thing that's happened where people have put out so much about fake news that everybody believes now all news is bad. There's nothing out there that's, legit and it's relevant. That's not the case. There are many, many news journalists, news outlets who are out here trying to put the word out, who are trying to put the truth out. And what you have to do is recognize where you go to get that information. You can't always rely on your local TV news, because you might be in a small area with hardly any broadband, and your local station might be owned by somebody big like Sinclair Broadcasting, and they're totally right wing. They run all their stations with they had to put out an editorial that every station has to run with an extreme right wing message. So if that's what you're getting on your local television, then go online, read your news. Look up NPR, PBS, BBC, MSNBC. Evelyn and I were talking earlier. I get a free newsletter every morning in my email from the New York Times every day, from the Washington Post every day. Do not just rely on watching the news for your information. Do not rely on TikTok. Do not rely on Twitter. Do not rely on any of that stuff, because you're getting a lot of misinformation. And I heard today that Alex Jones from InfoWars, or whatever it's called, has been allowed back on Twitter. So all kind of more conspiracy junk is going to get out there. So if you are trying to look for legitimate news content and outlets to get your information from, then that's what you share with your friends and your family in your circle. If you got to put out a little email blast to a group of people, say, hey, I saw this. Did you know this? Or did you check this out? Or give them a link to a YouTube little clip of a interview with Liz Cheney with Rachel Maddow, which was like powerful stuff. I mean, she said some powerful stuff, scary stuff. Put it out there. Let your people see that stuff, because I guarantee you they didn't see it. And if you help put the truth out there, that's like helping push back against all the misinformation, the disinformation, and the lies. That's how you push back. You have to push back with the truth. And so you have to have those conversations. If you don't have the conversations, then put it in a text group, or like I said, email somebody, or have one of your younger people do a TikTok with it and put the information out there. If TikTok's going to be putting out misinformation, then you put the truth out there on TikTok. That's how we fight back. You fight back with the truth. And so if you help share that with your family to help them realize what is going on, at least staying abreast of the seriousness of what's happening now. I mean, because I'm a former journalist, I'm always in the weeds. I mean, people just don't always go down in the weeds, but I'm always in the weeds with stories. So there's a whole bunch of people like that, but most times your family members and your friends, they're not in the weeds. They don't even know what happened. Heck, half the time I ask friends, did they hear about what happened, the other day in Philly? And they're like, no, I didn't hear about it. We're like, dog, do y'all watch the news? No. I mean, they don't even watch the local news. So how are you going to expect to know what's going on nationally? I think I got to this bottom point. Let me just get here. Talked about the voter registration issues. Make sure they're registered. Making sure we cut through. Oh, but at the end of the day, you take it upon yourself, each and every one of us, to be the friend, the family member, or the person in the club who's giving people information, who's keeping people abreast, who's making them aware of the importance of voting, who's talking about voting, who's constantly letting them know, look, things are coming up. People are thinking, oh, that's November, that's a ways away. No, we're in it. We are in it. And they're counting, and you have to let your family members and friends know, they're counting on people to just be overwhelmed and not want to be involved. And that's part of the messages that they send you. Like, I've been watching some ads that caught my attention from some PAC called AFP. And I looked it up. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I realized, and that's another thing, is always find out who's the source behind the source. Go on and Google them and see whose money is behind a lot of these PACs that are putting these ads on TV and literally online. Like, you could be online and those little ads show up and they're, little flashy things. They spend a lot of money doing that because they realize how much people are online. And they're putting out these subtle messages already, and they're flooding the zone already. And so, and I know they do it in our communities because the last election, I kept hearing stuff. I listened to the radio on an app called Tune In Radio, where I can listen to radio from all over the world. And they consciously put misinformation, outright lies. It was a PAC supporting the Republicans, Trump, about you could go, and was on Black radio, that you could, they were putting medicine and hormones and giving them to our kids in the schools, and they're trying to change it. And I was like, this is just lies. And they were preying on, like, trying to gin up like an anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans message. And I'm like, this is wrong. And what I did, just because I've been in the media, I knew what to do. I contacted TuneIn. I emailed them and I said, this ad is a lie. You need to take it off the air because you're targeting Black people with lies. And I don't care what they paid for. It's lies. Take it off. It disappeared. I stopped hearing it. By the next day, I didn't hear it anymore. So you can be proactive. There's always a contact email. You can email somebody and say, hey, this is not true. Why are you putting this in my community? Why are you feeding my community these lies? I know they do that a lot also in the Latino population, where the Republicans will call people socialist and communist, because you have a lot of Latinos who come from countries like Venezuela, and now what's going on with Argentina. And so when they hear the word socialist, they freak out because they don't want to be involved with that. So they make Democrats and liberals socialists. And that's what gets pumped into the Latino communities. And so then that starts to make them think, oh, well, we don't want to deal with these people because, they're pushing a socialist agenda and whatever. It's all lies. So if you are keenly listening, keenly watching what people are putting out there, you can help your friends and family members determine and distinguish the differences, because some of this stuff is so nuanced, you don't even realize it. Like when I open up and look on my computer and I have MSN, and when they'll like have all these suggested stories, and I can tell by a headline that something's leaning some way, because first and foremost, a headline should never have a slant to give you, a viewpoint of a certain political viewpoint. It should just state the facts. Just state the facts. And I've been seeing this something come up from this news outlet that MSN is pushing through, from something called State of the Union. And I've been looking at it and I'm like, this is a right-wing leaning thing. I'm gonna have to look into who's behind it. That's how my mind thinks. Who's behind this? Who's behind the Epoch Times? Who's behind? See, all these and these right-leaning things. Find out who's behind them, whose money is behind them, and what their bent is. Because a lot of these things come at your people very subtly. It's on YouTube. They've got a lot of stuff on YouTube. And so you have to be very, very careful what you pick up and read and look at, and help your family and friends realize that too, to be more discerning. And the reason why I watch a lot of things like PBS and the BBC, I even watch France 24, but again, I'm a former journalist, so I'm used to watching everything, is because they spend a little more time on the stories, and they give you a little more breadth and depth, and explaining context, because context is always, always important, especially like with the stories right now, like in the Middle East. So always try to find something. That's why reading is important. So if you read the story, you're going to get way more than you get by watching it on TV, and they gave it a 30-second reader or a minute 15 in a package. If you read the story, it was an AP News story or a Reuters story or something from like Huffington Post, you're going to get more content. And try to find also some of these more independent things like Axios and ProPublica, which has been doing all that great stuff, reporting on what's been going on in the Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas and all that money, that's been coming from these billionaire right-wing people who are pushing their agenda on the court and literally on the country. So those places like that are really good to read. You don't have to always watch, but you can read your news. And lastly, I would just suggest that you read, if you have time, because I know everybody's busy, but given the time that we're in, and that we're facing someone who wants to be a dictator. And you have a lot of people who are supporting him, millions of people who seem to be okay with that. And that's not what this democracy is about. I would suggest reading 3 books. Um, the first one I read about 4 years ago is called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. It is literally a little book. It's like this big and literally only this thick. It's powerful because it gives you the points of when you start to see a democracy slide into authoritarianism or fascism and tyranny. And you would be frightened to see where we are on the bullet points of what's going on in this country. It makes you very aware. Another book that I think is really important to read is called Caste, Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Very powerful book. It also will help explain the dynamics of the United States and how the United States tries to pit, and it's white supremacy in general, and it happens worldwide over, but pit minority groups against each other. Because at the end of the day, that still allows them to be the oppressor and rule over all of us with the minority rule. And we know what's happening in this country. You know, in 10 years, it's going to be a very brown and black country. So read the book Caste. It's quite eye-opening. And then finally, it's the new book out, but I've seen enough excerpts from it and seen enough interviews that I literally plan to pick up her book. And I would have never done this, but I'm going to get Liz Cheney's new books called Oath and Honor, a memoir and a warning. It's mind blowing. I mean, what the 2 interviews I watched her do, the stuff she talks about that happened around January 6th, and what these Republican Congress people were doing and not doing, it would blow your mind. You realize that the whole party is gone. The whole party's gone. And we are in, like, as she's saying, we are in serious, serious times. So that's why we have to continually work to talk to our family members, our friends, our associates, to let them know we need all of us. We need all of us to get out here and be involved. And lastly, I heard a quote from Norman Lear this weekend. They said it on the Sunday morning show. They re-aired an old interview with him, and he said, and it was wonderful. He said, "The price of freedom is citizen participation." I think it says it all. So that's all I have to say.
Wow, just as I thought. Yep, you set the stage, Chloe, during the meeting the other night. And I'm not surprised by what we just heard. It was powerful. It was absolutely filled with so much wonderful, much needed information. So thank you for that. And for everyone that's joining tonight, I just want to remind you that what we just heard from Chloe is actually one of our learning objectives from the
Need to mute
summit.
everybody. There's blowback or something or
Okay,
other.
can you mute Gloria?
Yeah,
I'll
I'm muting.
Okay, thank you. Let me see who might be not muted. Chloe, could you mute, please? It might be from your area. Okay. All right, but anyway, what I was going to say is that what we just heard from Chloe was one of our learning objectives from the summit. And I'm going to read to what it says. Connection and sharing of experiences. Understand the power of participants' past experiences and how we can use them to collaborate with each other to create the change we want to see. This was in action tonight, and this is what we want to see going forward also. And also, here we are together, a small group of 10 people, it doesn't matter, but a commitment to meeting monthly, moving forward, to help participants remain focused and resilient in every aspect of getting out the vote. That's what we're all about tonight. And what I would like to do now is to ask you guys to remain muted, please. And if you have a question to ask Chloe, this is your time to do that. So I'll give you a few minutes to write your question in the chat, please. Okay, Chloe, I see one question in the chat already. And the question is from Anne, and she asked, how do we help people register to vote?
Well, that's a good question. And that goes to one of the things I was going to mention in the challenge or call to action. There are a lot of other groups out here on the ground who work nonstop with different communities. One of the organizations I get really involved with is Black Voters Matter. It's run out of Latasha Brown. She's out of Atlanta, but they go all over the country and they do voter registration drives. So you can always connect with a group like that that does voter registrations drives to see if you could connect with them, if they could come or help you set up and learn how to do a voter registration drive where you are, because they're very adept at it and they do it all over the country. And there's more groups on the ground like that because every state's law is different. So you had to be very careful, especially if you're a third party group registering people to vote. If nothing else, tell them to go down to their county board of elections and go register. If you can't physically have a table set up where you are, direct them to the county board of elections or ask them, see if they can go online even and ask for a registration form. But if nothing else, send them to the county board of elections, because I know there's a new law that was passed in Florida. They've basically banned a lot of third-party organizations now from coming in to do voter registration drives, because they saw that that's where a lot of minority groups, definitely Black people, but minority groups get registered through a lot of these third-party groups on the ground coming in and getting their voters registered. So they picked up on that. So now they've basically made it like, well, there are only certain ones that can do it, or they got to go through certain hoops and meet certain criteria so that, to be even allowed to come in to do those voter registration drives. And then you could call your county board of elections and ask them, what the rules are. And if you could pick up stacks, and if they let you do that, just find out how to make that work. And then if they can let you figure out how to do it, then do that. But always ask, because every state is different and new laws are being passed all the time.
Thank you for that, Chloe. And there's one other question here from Roseanne, and she says, as a white Spanish person that the Black brown community in my area is not very fond of due to how they have been treated by our white county officials, how do you open up to the dialogue with them to help them in their communities?
Open up the dialogue. I'm sorry, open up the dialogue with whom?
The Black brown community.
Oh, in terms of the white Hispanic?
I think she's talking about in terms of voter registration
or
getting out the vote overall.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding it properly. So you're asking how the white Hispanic can interact with the Black and brown community that has not been treated well by the white Hispanic people who are in the government.
And the whole focus is how do you interact with them so that they will be more active as voters?
Gain their trust. Number one, be there and have conversations. Talk about the issues. Find out what it is that they're concerned about, that they are not happy about. That's first and foremost. Again, meet people where they are. And then, talk about, well, can you register? Are you registered to vote? Because that's the first step in making change, is voting. Locally is very important. It's not just even the presidential election. We just saw in our election here, the school board elections were critical in my county. And they flipped all these school boards that were being inundated with Moms for Liberty and extremists. And the Democrats flipped them. It was amazing. But the county commissioners, Democrats, got voted in. The state Supreme Court, a new judge got voted in, a Democrat. Very important, as we come to 2024, we know this election is going to be tight. It's going to be in the courts. It's very important who you have in the courts. So help them understand that they have a say locally with their vote. And they should, that's where it starts. That's their power, is their vote. And vote those people out if they're not representing them and not being respectful. Start showing up to some of those meetings. I did. My state senator, he holds meetings every couple months. He comes back and has a breakfast, a coffee. I show up. I may not ask a question, but I'm listening and I'm seeing the vibe and what's going on in my community. You don't have to say anything. You could just be there listening and paying attention, but be on top of it. Encourage them to come and participate. Encourage them to come and participate because that's their power. If they don't come and participate, then that's not, their voice is not being heard. It's both voting, getting them registered, and participation.
Thank you for that question, Roseanne, and for your response to Chloe. Are there other questions? I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, but we would like to have all questions in the chat only. Okay, I don't see any more questions at the moment. So we have, we're right at time anyway. We have about, I think, 8 minutes left. So before Chloe comes on for closure, what I would like to have you guys do is think about, this is a great opportunity, a great beginning for us as a POC to just really educate each other. And I think, Chloe, you've done just a fantastic job tonight. So I really want to say thank you for that. And also, we want to keep these meetings going monthly. So I saw some people on the call tonight. If you guys are interested in participating and would like to be one of the speakers, I encourage you to hang around tonight for maybe like 5 minutes or so we can just talk about and just see if you're interested in what your topic would be. It doesn't have to be one person that's leading this. You could come on together as maybe a group of 2 or 3 people. It's up to you. We talked about that also at the summit. So this is just a follow-up from that meeting. So if you're interested, just hang around. If not, then we can talk later on, maybe in the caucus space. But thank you guys for being here. And last word is yours, Chloe.
Well, I just, Evelyn said that what my call to action would be. The call to action is who you calling, who are you texting, who are you going to have a conversation with this weekend? And the holidays are here. I know people don't like to talk about politics, but all you have to do is ask, well, are you going to vote? Are you planning on voting? Talk to your family members. Doesn't have to be long. Doesn't have to be pressured. Just get them thinking. Hear them out. But who are you going to start communicating with to start the conversation? Because the time is now, and it's a serious time. So you've got a whole circle of people, I'm sure. So who are you going to be in touch with?